Let's be clear. We can't expect relief from the tired old theories that in 8 short years doubled the national debt, threw our economy into a tailspin, and led us into this mess But as important as it was that I was able to sign this plan into law, it is only a first step on the road to economic recovery. These kinds of irresponsible budgets and inexcusable practices are now in the past. For the first time in many years, my administration has produced a budget that represents an honest reckoning of with the fiscal mess we've inherited and the costs of this financial crisis. I've proposed a budget that cuts our deficit in half by the end of this Monday. In my first full cabinet meeting, I will ask all my department and agency heads for specific proposals for cutting their budgets. Earlier this week, I held my first cabinet meeting and sent a clear message: cut what doesn't work. For the first time, utility companies and corporate leaders are joining, rather than opposing, environmental advocates and labor leaders to create a new system of clean energy initiatives that will help unleash a new era of growth and prosperity. Today we're called to remember not only the day our country was born, we're also called to remember the indomitable spirit of the first American citizens who made that day possible. This past week, the American Nurses Association, representing millions of nurses across America, and the American Medical Association, representing doctors across our nation, announced their support because they've seen firsthand the need for health insurance reform. Reports showed that in the first few months of this year, the recession we faced when I took office was even deeper than anyone thought at the time. It told us the first is almost guaranteed to double healthcare costs over the next decade, leave millions more Americans without insurance, leave those with insurance vulnerable to arbitrary denials of coverage, and bankrupt state and federal governments. In New Orleans, hundreds of kids just started the school year at Langston Hughes Elementary, the first school built from scratch since Katrina. Earlier in the week, we learned that the manufacturing sector has posted its first gains in 18 months, and that many of the banks that borrowed money at the height of the financial crisis are now returning it to taxpayers with interest. We've challenged other nations to join us, not only to spur global demand, but to address the underlying problems that caused such a deep global recession in the first place. We joined the first meeting between Israeli and Palestinian leaders in nearly a year, a meeting that even 9 months ago did not seem possible. For the first time ever, all 5 committees in Congress responsible for health reform have passed a version of legislation. We also announced that we'll be taking additional steps through our financial stability plan to make more credit available to the small, local, and community banks that so many small businesses depend on. The banks who know their borrowers, who gave them their first loan and watched them grow. We learned that the economy grew for the first time in more than a year, and faster than at any point in the previous 2 years. So I'm recording this message from Seoul, South Korea, as I finish up my first presidential trip to Asia. Our economy is growing for the first time in a year.